Hello everyone, and welcome to Diplomatic Briefing. After months of back and forth in the US-EU trade tug-of-war, this week saw a temporary pause, with the EU making significant concessions. Major EU countries, like France, whose President Macron has claimed that continental Europe has become a soft ruler in geopolitics, seem either unwilling or unable to change this situation. Surrender, capitulation, and humiliation have seemingly become synonymous with the US-EU trade agreement. On August 1st, Bloomberg columnist Laurent wrote that the humiliating tariff deal reached with the US has not made Europe stronger. Instead, it has exposed the fragile reality of Europe's dependence on American technology and military power. Meanwhile, more and more European elites have begun to privately complain that, just as China was once forced open by foreign powers through military might, Europe today may be heading toward its own century of humiliation. According to the agreement, the US will impose a 15% tariff on EU goods. The EU will increase its investment in the US by $600 billion, and will also purchase American military equipment as well as $750 billion worth of US energy products. The article says that when the agreement was announced, Trump was all smiles, while European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen had to force a smile. Although the arrival of this agreement brought a temporary sigh of relief to the financial markets, the claim that a new era of stable transatlantic relations between the US and Europe has begun is sounding increasingly hollow. Bloomberg Economics points out that the US may still launch an investigation into EU pharmaceuticals, and there are differing opinions on the future of the 50% steel tariffs. If the Trump administration believes that the EU has failed to fulfill its massive investment commitments, it may make further demands. U.S. Commerce Secretary also seems eager to bring up dissatisfaction with the EU's regulation of tech companies like Meta again. This also explains why the claim that this agreement is a lesser evil compared to the U.S.'s long-term confrontational approach doesn't hold water. Although the EU managed to secure a 15% tariff rate, which is lower than the 30% previously threatened by Trump, the rate is still 3 times higher than before Trump took office. This is also the highest tariff level between the U.S. and Europe since the 1930s. Andrew Wilson, Deputy Secretary General of the International Chamber of Commerce, said that businesses are realizing they are facing historically high tariff rates. Unless the U.S. economy suffers catastrophic consequences, this situation is unlikely to change. The Chamber has observed that some companies are experiencing shipping delays and are reassessing their supply chain strategies. Currently, trading with the United States is extremely difficult, and the complexity of doing business has reached levels no one could have imagined. Laurent said that Europeans understand that American protectionism will worsen the situation for Americans themselves, but they don't see the EU becoming stronger as a result. Because Europe relies on the United States for military power and technology, Trump's threats have found an opening. At the NATO summit, NATO Secretary even referred to Trump as Dad, which perfectly illustrates Macron's point that the EU is not formidable enough to command respect. After all, if blackmail works, why bother going through the trouble of negotiating? Trump could just send a tariff email and settle everything. Sebastian Gorka, senior advisor for counterterrorism at the U.S. National Security Council and a Trump advisor, once put it this way: even people who have known President Trump for 10 years find it hard to believe that the entire EU would not yield to the America First policy. The article also mentions that when it comes to China, Europe's situation is not optimistic either. China is an important export market for German companies like Volkswagen and Mercedes-Benz, but now Chinese companies are catching up quickly, and have even surpassed these European giants. In recent years, the share of EU GDP from exports to China has dropped by about half a percentage point, while EU imports from China are on the rise. Laurent said that in the 19th century, China once lost its sovereignty and was forced open by European powers through military force. But now, more and more European elites have begun to privately complain, saying that Europe may be heading toward its own century of humiliation. This comparison is not without reason. Professor Forey from Oxford University in the UK pointed out that what led to the decline of the Qing dynasty was a self-destructive complacency. The once effective systems and innovations failed to keep up with the pace of technological advancement. The EU's single market has indeed achieved remarkable success in manufacturing and supply chains, but its capital markets, which are crucial for innovation, remain fragmented. Tech companies have also suffered from long-term underfunding. As Italian economist Draghi warned last year, Europe is falling into a mid-level technology trap. Laurent concluded by reminding that the EU must use the time gained from this tariff agreement to strengthen its trade defenses and reduce external dependencies. Economist Santoft recently pointed out that Europe must first implement a coordinated industrial policy, second, consider how to nurture future tech giants, and finally, re-examine its competition policy. Laurent believes that Europe's moment of humiliation will last for quite some time, but it's not too late to act now. There is still time to avoid a century of humiliation. To sum it up simply, although politicians from major EU countries may complain verbally, they clearly don't have the guts to say no to Trump. Compared to Brazil and India, Europe actually has a lot more bargaining chips. Unlike Southeast Asian countries that are highly dependent on the US market, Europe could have secured a much better deal. Secondly, Europe's worst-case scenario isn't even about the AI and giant robots that are now seen as the future of the world. Europe has no independent technology at all, which is why Europe's decline is only just beginning. Third, in recent years, Europe has closely followed the US in trying to de-risk from the Chinese supply chain, which in essence means decoupling from China. But the results have shown that Europe really does need to de-risk. However, the real risk doesn't come from China, but from the United States. Europe's submissiveness to the US has another fatal weakness: it relies entirely on the US for security. Achieving strategic autonomy and national defense is something that must never be relaxed at any time. August 1st is Army Day, and CCTV's military channel aired a special series called Tackling Tough Problems, showcasing the PLA's efforts to build a stronger military. In the first episode, footage of the Information Support Forces drills was revealed for the first time, featuring a joint exercise in a naval command center. Many parts of the footage were blurred for confidentiality. The exercise was designed so that a formation of drones would search and identify targets in the mission area, while a special strike aircraft formation arrived at the launch zone, and the fleet of ships also locked onto the targets. Faced with special circumstances, the Red Side's multi-service forces carried out joint reconnaissance and early warning, successfully completing a joint strike at sea. Tang Chansheng, the coordinator of the joint training, pointed out that joint operations are not simply the stacking of kill chains, but rather require restructuring the chain-like structure into a resilient, adaptive, and highly robust damage network. The moment a USB is plugged into a computer, it's enough to implant a multi-layered disguised Trojan virus, which can paralyze the entire system within seconds once activated. So how do we defend this binary Great Wall built of zeros and ones? Behind the scenes, there may be a group of unsung warriors holding the line and fighting. As one member of the Information Support Force pointed out, the moment a USB is inserted into a computer, it's enough to implant a multi-layered fake Trojan virus, which can paralyze the entire system within seconds once activated. Building a cybersecurity defense network, a digital Great Wall, is all to provide solid support for joint operations. The video mentions that during the Battle of Shangjinling, the enemy fired more than 1.9 million shells at the PLA positions, making it almost impossible to withstand. Amid the relentless shelling at Shangjinling, our predecessors used their own bodies to conduct electricity, ensuring communication on the battlefield. Today, they face the threat of data bombardment at any moment, fighting in the trenches of chip eaters. Although the form of technology has changed, the unbreakable nerve has always remained the same. In modern joint operations, this nerve has become a network, connecting sky and earth, sea and air, from entire systems down to individual soldiers, a full chain supported by a communications network transmitting massive amounts of data every second. So, how do we defend this binary Great Wall of zeros and ones? We must adhere to information dominance, joint victory, deep integration, and the precise and efficient implementation of information support by the entire military's joint operations system. Behind this, there is a group of nameless warriors who persist in fight. When they become a single drop of water in the joint operations system, they unite to form the iron fist of the entire military's combat power. The PLA Information Support Force was established in Beijing on April 19, 2024, and is directly led and commanded by the Central Military Commission. It is a newly created strategic branch and serves as a key support for the overall construction and operation of the network information system. It holds an important position and bears great responsibility in promoting the high-quality development of the PLA and winning modern wars. In modern warfare, the coordinated operations of multiple military branches and the collaboration between weapons are the keys to determining victory or defeat. The mission of the Information Support Force is to build a cyber and electronic Great Wall for network security defense, providing support for joint operations. This rare public exposure shows that over the past year, they have already been fully engaged in combat drills and have demonstrated powerful effectiveness. In May, the India-Pakistan air battle was a result of coordinated operations, highlighting the importance of the Information Support Force. And this rare exposure of their training footage can be said to serve as a deterrent.